My friends, take a deep breath, Detroit fans, because what's been happening inside Allen Park over the last few days has set off a red alert. Something's off, and this time, it's not just about plays that didn't work or drives that stalled early. It's about attitude. It's about leadership. It's about accountability. When a team builds its identity on hard work, honesty, and unity, any step away from that path starts to feel wrong, and for good reason, because what was said in that last press conference didn't sound like someone trying to fix things, but someone trying to defend themselves. And that kind of attitude can cost a lot inside a locker room that's always preached the exact opposite. So, my friends, smash that like button to support the channel and drop a comment below saying "Go Lions." I believe, after John Morton's latest press conference, something just didn't sit right with a lot of Detroit Lions fans, and honestly, it shouldn't, because what we heard from him wasn't accountability, it was deflection. Morton, the team's offensive coordinator, stood in front of the media and essentially said, "It's not my fault." He blamed the offensive line, he blamed execution, he blamed communication, he blamed everyone but himself. And for a franchise that's built its identity on toughness, honesty, and ownership, that kind of attitude cuts against everything Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes have worked to create in Detroit. This isn't just about words at a microphone. It's about culture. Think about it. When Dan Campbell steps to the podium after a bad loss, he starts with himself. He doesn't run from responsibility. Same with position coaches like Kelvin Shepard and Dave Phipp. Every single one of them holds themselves accountable before pointing to players. Jared Goff does the same thing. Even the guys in the trenches, the offensive linemen who've been battling through injuries and tough defensive fronts, never shy away from owning their mistakes. That's the Lions' way. It's why this team turned from an NFL punchline into a legitimate contender. But now, in the middle of a season where expectations have never been higher, one man seems to be breaking that chain. Morton insists the communication is fine, even though Campbell himself said otherwise. That's not just a disagreement, that's a crack in the unity that's been the foundation of Detroit's resurgence. You can hear the frustration in Campbell's voice, see it in his posture. He's not the type to throw a coach under the bus, but when your head coach is talking about needing to look into how the offense operates, that's not nothing. And look, the results speak for themselves. The offense that once operated like a finely tuned machine suddenly looks disjointed, predictable, and slow. You've got two players moving at the same time, flags flying, the rhythm completely gone. What happened to the creativity we saw last season? What happened to the quick slants, the motion, the balance that kept defenses on their heels? Now it's screen after screen after screen, so repetitive that fans watching from home can call out the next play before the snap. And if the fans can see it, you can bet opposing defensive coordinators can too. It's like the offense has forgotten its own identity. Morton inherited one of the most talented units in Lions history, a quarterback playing at a Pro Bowl level, one of the best offensive lines in football, a dynamic receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown, a first-round running back in Jahmyr Gibbs, and legitimate depth everywhere. Yet somehow, this unit has become average, mediocre, and the worst part, instead of owning it, Morton shrugs it off. "We'll get it right," he says, but the results don't show it. Meanwhile, Campbell keeps preaching the same message: accountability, communication, and unity. That's what built this team. But Morton's press conference made it sound like he's living in a completely different world. The head coach says the communication isn't working. Morton says it's fine. The players admit they need to be better. Morton says the players just didn't execute. How does that coexist inside one locker room? It's one thing to have a rough stretch offensively. It's another to refuse to take ownership of it. The stubbornness is what's alarming. Sticking with the same failed concepts week after week isn't toughness, it's denial. You can't call screens 5 times in a game, watch them get blown up, and then blame everyone else for not making it work. You can't put Gibbs on blitz pickup against a linebacker running 20 miles per hour and then act surprised when it collapses. That's not bad luck, that's bad planning. Morton's approach is out of sync with everything this locker room represents. This is a group that fought through years of losing, clawed its way back into respectability, and finally found belief in something real. The Lions aren't perfect, they know that, but they've built this thing on being honest with themselves. You watch Kelvin Shepard speak, or Dave Phipp, or even Dan Campbell after a tough week, and you see men who care deeply about fixing what's wrong. When Morton stands there and shifts blame, it feels like a betrayal of that progress. And here's the scary part, the next game might decide a lot. Campbell knows it, the players know it, and honestly, so does Morton. This upcoming matchup isn't just about points on the board, it's about whether this coaching staff stays aligned or starts to fracture. If the offense sputters again, if they come out flat and predictable against a defense that's already struggling, then serious changes could be coming. Campbell didn't say it outright, but the implication was clear. Play calling responsibilities could be on the line. Because the truth is, this team is too talented to keep spinning its wheels. They've worked too hard to let ego and denial drag them down. Morton doesn't need to be perfect. No coach is, but he does need to be accountable. Detroit fans have seen what accountability looks like under Campbell. They've embraced it, believed in it, built hope around it. That's why this situation feels so uncomfortable. It's not just bad football, it's bad leadership. Because make no mistake, if this offense comes out against Washington and delivers another flat, predictable performance, the patience inside Allen Park could start to run out fast. Dan Campbell is loyal, but he's not blind. He's not going to let an entire season's worth of work go down the drain because one coach refuses to adjust. This isn't a rebuild anymore. This is a team built to win right now, and every second of wasted potential is one step backward from the ultimate goal, competing for a Super Bowl. When Campbell talked to the media, he didn't sound angry, he sounded disappointed. And that's often worse, because disappointment comes when expectations are high, when you know what this group is capable of. The Detroit Lions offense was once the pride of this city, efficient, explosive, and fearless. Now, it's become cautious, predictable, and painfully rigid. Fans who watched last season's creativity, the misdirection, the play action, the way Amon-Ra St. Brown was moved around to create mismatches, are left wondering where that innovation went. Morton keeps saying communication is good, but anyone watching can see something's off. You don't have two players moving at the same time if communication is good. You don't have receivers looking confused at the line of scrimmage or Jared Goff holding the ball because routes didn't develop. Those aren't just execution problems, those are coaching problems. And yet Morton keeps insisting it's everyone else's fault. That's what's eating at the fans and probably the locker room too. The culture in Detroit has been built on unity and accountability. Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have always been on the same page, from roster construction to player development to the emotional tone of the locker room. The staff under them, guys like Kelvin Shepard and Dave Phipp, are the same way. They set the tone. They lead by example. So when one voice inside the building starts pushing a different message, it doesn't just cause friction, it threatens the identity the team has spent years creating. And you can see that friction spilling into the fan base too. The frustration isn't just about a couple of losses or some bad play calls. It's about watching something special get put at risk by someone who doesn't seem to get it. Detroit fans don't mind losing if their team goes down swinging, giving everything they've got. But they can't stand watching their coaches make excuses. That's not the blue-collar spirit this city connects with. That's not Detroit football. Here's the thing. This offense doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. The talent is there. The system is there. What it needs is someone willing to adapt, to stop being stubborn and start being smart. Quick slants, motion, a few creative wrinkles, that's what kept defenses off balance before. Get St. Brown in motion, use Gibbs in space, mix in some hard play action to freeze linebackers. The pieces are sitting right there. The only thing missing is the willingness to evolve. And that's what makes Morton's press conference so frustrating. Instead of hearing solutions, fans heard excuses. Instead of humility, they heard arrogance. Instead of leadership, they heard blame. This isn't what the Lions have become under Dan Campbell. When your head coach is willing to say, "We didn't coach well enough," you can't have your offensive coordinator turning around and saying, "It's not my fault." That's not alignment, that's ego. It's hard to ignore the contrast between Morton and everyone else in that building. You listen to Campbell talk about fixing communication and cleaning things up, and you hear a man determined to get it right. You listen to Jared Goff own his mistakes, to the offensive line acknowledge their missed assignments, and you hear guys who understand accountability. But when Morton steps to the mic, you hear detachment, like he's watching someone else's offense fall apart, not his own. And look, no one's saying Morton can't turn it around. He absolutely can, but it starts with self-awareness. It starts with looking in the mirror and saying, maybe I need to change. The Lions have too much on the line to wait for that realization to come on its own. This isn't just another Sunday game, it's a statement game. Campbell and his players have to come out swinging, with urgency, creativity, and fire. Because if this offense once again limps its way through 4 quarters of sloppy, uninspired football, it's going to force a decision. Fans want to believe in this team. They've believed through decades of disappointment, but belief is built on trust. And right now, Morton's words have cracked that trust. Detroit doesn't need perfection, it needs accountability. It needs every man in that building pulling in the same direction. And if someone refuses to, well, this franchise has finally reached a point where it can't afford to carry dead weight anymore. So as Sunday approaches, one question hangs over this team. Will the Detroit Lions offense finally rediscover its identity, or are we watching the start of a deeper problem that could force Dan Campbell to make a drastic change? Lions fans, let me know in the comments, what do you think needs to happen next? And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe for more exclusive Lions coverage, and stay tuned. I'll have another video on screen right now breaking down how Detroit can fix its offensive rhythm heading into the next game. Because honestly, this moment feels like a turning point, not just for John Morton, but for the entire Lions organization. You can feel it, right? There's a tension in the air that goes beyond just bad play calling or a rough few weeks. It's about whether this coaching staff can keep the same unity, the same purpose, the same energy that has defined the Dan Campbell era since day one. Because when accountability starts slipping at the top, it trickles down fast. You look back at what's made this Detroit team different over the last few years, and it's always come down to alignment. Every coach, every player, every staff member moving in the same direction. That's what's allowed the Lions to build something real, a team that plays for each other, that reflects the toughness of its city. But when one voice, especially a key voice like the offensive coordinator, starts to drift from that shared mindset, you risk losing the chemistry that made this group special. And it's not just about Morton's words anymore, it's about what happens next. Because Dan Campbell has never been afraid to make bold decisions when something isn't working. He's proven that before. He's shown that loyalty has its limits when it threatens the team's progress. The Lions' goal isn't just to be competitive, it's to be elite. This roster was built with that purpose in mind. So if the offense keeps underperforming, it's not crazy to imagine that Campbell could take back play-calling duties or shift responsibilities before the season slips away. But let's be real, the best-case scenario here isn't firing anyone. It's fixing it. It's Morton looking in the mirror, realizing that this offense has lost its spark, and choosing to do something about it. Because he has the tools. He has the weapons. He just has to stop being so stubborn. Stop trying to force a scheme that clearly doesn't fit the current rhythm of this team. Adapt. That's what great coaches do. You work around your weaknesses. If your offensive line is banged up, you design quicker plays. You move the pocket. You create motion. You keep defenses guessing. The Lions did all that last season.